Okay, so for the third demonstration, we are going to summarize technical materials. And as you can see here, my prompt is actually fairly succinct. Can you explain the following in plain language? And what I did here is I just dumped a section of a white paper that I found online about accounting for software as a service. And so, all I did was really, it's a bunch of technical stuff explained to me in plain language, and it does a very good job of this. You can modify like what level you want the plain language to be. You could say explain this to a third grader, or explain it to, in plain language, or explain it to a high school teacher, whatever you like, and it'll kind of adjust the language of its response accordingly. So again, this demonstration is really about explaining technical things in plain language, because I find that in the public sector, we are asked quite a bit to do this, given the audience, given the general public nature of our disclosures, of our communications. So it does a good job of this. One thing I want to highlight here, and this is kind of part of the process, is that I asked it to summarize in plain language, and it did make a decision in terms of what was important. So it highlighted the first and the second decision that the committee made, and then it excluded some of these smaller things, that there may be several consequential impacts beyond the immediate accounting, right? So it's not kind of robotically summarizing every point that it read. It's making an editorial decision, and that's what makes the responses higher quality. But there's a risk that goes with that. If you don't review it, you might have missed something that's important to you that it thought was consequential, right? So it's still just a robot doing this. Second example, can you summarize IFRS 17 for me in plain language? So again, this is maybe something that public sector entities don't deal with, but sometimes you encounter it. Sometimes you have a related entity that's dealing with it, and you just want to know what is this? And so in simple terms, it does a good job of summarizing. Again, the standard requires insurance companies to recognize the fair value of their insurance contracts over time, rather than when they were issued or when a claim is made. It's very summary level information. It's not really explaining how the standard works or anything. But again, for certain briefings, for a certain level of audience, this is actually the appropriate level of detail, and you didn't spend very much time generating this summary. But then what happens when you dig into a standard and you kind of encounter something even more technical that you don't understand? You just need to understand it better. And so you would typically Google, but maybe you can ask the AI, can you explain IFRS 17 contract boundaries to me in plain language? And it does. And so it will summarize sort of the criteria and in plain language. And it when you read it, it really does make sense. Obviously, you're going to lose a lot by only reading the summary, so you can't sort of get away with it. But in a situation where you've read it, you kind of get it, maybe this helps you understand it. And again, it's definitely a useful tool for where now you've been asked to sort of be the expert in the group, and you have to explain it to other people. What is this contract boundary concept? How does it work? Explain it to me so I can understand. And that's really where this thing has already given you a draft, and you can try to modify it based on your understanding as well. And then this is something, I asked as a final prompt, can you further summarize each paragraph you wrote in your previous response about contract boundaries into concise PowerPoint slide bullets, perhaps 7 to 10 words per bullet. So that's the best practice. You don't want overly wordy bullets. So now I'm getting it to help me generate a slide about contract boundaries. And so, the one bullet here is fairly generic. I don't even know if I would have it. Would I have it at the front? But a lot of these are very simplified given the criteria. If I think maybe that's too simplified, I might enhance the word criteria. Maybe I think this is right because I'm going to talk to all these different points and I want to leave room for my own presentation. But again, we spend a lot of time summarizing things and like staring at these paragraphs and figuring out how to create a bullet. But that time has been saved, and now I can just kind of focus on the presentation, think about what I'm going to speak to, what I'm going to say, and then maybe modify these things going forward. So again, it's really useful for all these types of communications. Again, most of these communications are fairly structured, whether it's a briefing note or a memo. So you can get that generated by the AI and probably save yourself a lot of time. Not everybody can. I think the one final thing I want to note is that, I've worked in quite a few different settings where, a lot of back and forth on what is plain language. Is it too simple? Oh, you forgot to add this. There's a lot of back and forth among, us before a briefing goes up, etc. A lot of time spent editing. And in some ways, I think that, having an AI generate the first draft, and then you can sort of be either harsh or critical with it, or simply accept it, because it is very good at kind of creating the types of communication we want. I think it'll just remove sort of not only just the time it takes to generate the first draft, but also that initial review process that we go through. And like I said, you can always just adjust the first draft based on your prompt. So it's something that as these tools get better, as well as we get better at using them, that first draft will be closer and closer to something will closer and closer to the final draft.